confirmation and the reaction from Hugh Hewitt. That's all coming up. But first, comparing the Trump administration to the Third Reich is apparently so 2 weeks ago. This week, in a new twist, USA Today published an editorial claiming there are alarming similarities between senior White House advisor Steve Bannon and ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Justification: apparently both see the battle between the U.S. and radical Islam as a clash of civilizations or something. We're joined now by David Mastio. He's deputy editorial page editor at USA Today. David, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So I don't think we're overstating. The lead of this piece is basically the claim that Steve Bannon and al-Baghdadi of ISIS share a similar worldview. In fact, that's a verbatim quote. So I want to play a quick game with you. It's called Who Did It? I want to put up on the screen the record of Steve Bannon and al-Baghdadi. Okay, so I'm just going to go quickly through and we're going to see who did what. Number one, beheaded journalists. Okay, Baghdadi. Used chemical weapons on the Kurds, also Baghdadi. Employs child soldiers, another for Baghdadi. Mass executions of Christians. Declared a caliphate. You're getting the point here. And by the way, I don't think Bannon has murdered a single Yazidi. So I get that you don't like Steve Bannon. Totally legitimate. Problems for Steve Bannon, I understand. But comparing him to the head of ISIS, over the top, no?
No. The problem with Steve Bannon is that he shares a dangerous idea that plays right into the hands of al-Baghdadi. Al-Baghdadi wants the war in the Middle East to be between all of Islam and all of the West. We're at war with a psychotic death cult, a fringe of the Islamic world. And Bannon agrees with Baghdadi that it is war between Islam and the West. We don't need to give Baghdadi that propaganda victory. And when the strategic advisor or the strategic leader of the White House bumbles into giving a strategic victory to our enemies, that's a really big deal.
Okay, I guess just a couple of obvious points. One, presumably Baghdadi is talking about a literal war, indeed he's waging one, whereas Bannon is talking about some sort of metaphorical war because he hasn't, as previously noted, done the things we listed on the screen. He hasn't actually committed any atrocities. Baghdadi has. Therefore,
well, neither has Barack Obama, and neither has Donald Trump, but all three of them are leaders of the United States in our war with this fringe death cult of al-Baghdadi. Right, no, just because they don't pull the trigger doesn't mean that they're not responsible for the war.
Well, I mean, Bannon's been there a matter of weeks. I mean, you're not accusing him of atrocities, are you?
No, certainly.
Oh, okay, so I want to take your accusation seriously, but I just first want to establish that saying that he shares a similar worldview with the head of ISIS is really disproportionate in scale, and it's overstatement, and it diminishes, I think, your point. That's my view. You disagree. But let's get to what you said here. You're going after him in part for using this phrase in a radio interview. He said, Bannon said, quote, Islam is not a religion of peace, but of submission. Now, I think you'd agree as a journalist that truth is a defense, and as it turns out, the word Islam comes from the Arabic root for the term that means submission. And so why is it out of bounds to say that?
It's not out of bounds to say that. And of course, in the piece, we talked about many of his quotes. And of course,
that was the first one that you listed.
We had our investigators listen to hundreds of hours of his comments on his radio show, and the overarching idea that that the West is at war with all of Islam, that it's not just a fringe death cult of murderers and crazies that we're after, is at the center of his ideas.
Okay,
and it's disruptive.
You're skirting a direct question, though, and that is, you listed this after the many hours your investigators, as you just said, listened to his tapes. You came up with him saying Islam is a religion of submission. And I would just remind you that according to Islamic scholars, including those in this country, that's literally true. So why would you include that in the piece? Why is it offensive to say something that's literally true? What's wrong with that?
If that were all that he said, that would just be a statement of fact.
But you're included it in a 400-word piece, so why put that in there?
You're completely dodging the central argument, and you're not answering the argument. How is the
We've got time. I'm just asking you to respond to something that you wrote and explain it.
How is the West at war with all of Islam? How does that advance our goals in fighting the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda and the other horrible terrorist groups that are all across the Middle East?
Well, if you're asking me that question directly, I would say that demonstrably the West is not at war with all of Islam, or even with a large percentage of Islam. But I guess what
then we agree.
Objected to, hold on, but here's the problem with your piece and with so much of our dialogue on this subject, is that it treats actual truths as verboten. There's something naughty about saying something that's literally true. And what's literally true is, as Bannon, and far be it from me to defend Bannon, I'm just telling you this, we said, and you noted it, he described what Islam literally means. We should be allowed to say that without saying, oh, that's wrong somehow. Moreover, the truth is that ISIS is fighting what it believes is a religious war against the United States and Israel and other primarily Jewish or Christian countries. They see it in religious terms. And why is it wrong to say that out loud? Because, once again, it's true.
If we had picked that one phrase and wrote an editorial about how that one phrase was horrifying...
You included it. You still haven't explained why, but why did you include that? In the context of the editorial, it's all explained, Well, right, you're on TV now. Tell me why that's okay. Whatever. You're obviously not going to answer the question. You're not going to answer the question. But you're making the point that it's somehow wrong.
You're still dodging the central point. In fact, you've agreed with the exact reason that we have criticized Donald Trump's advisor. Now, the question
for saying that Islam is a religion of peace, for saying that there's a religious component to it, that is true. And if you can find a quote where Steve Bannon or anyone else in the administration says we're at war with all Muslims, I will say on TV that's insane and it's untrue. I would never defend that. That's just not accurate. But I don't see, you didn't produce any quote like that. Instead, you produced quotes like the one that I've repeated 3 times and you haven't accounted for. So just to the point, you seem uncomfortable with acknowledging what ISIS has no problem acknowledging, which is they're motivated by religious fervor. It's Islamic religious fervor. They don't speak for all Muslims, far from it, but they're still acting out of what they see are legitimate Islamic beliefs.
I absolutely agree with you that they believe that they are an Islamic group, but the West is not at war with all of Islam, and has anybody in the administration said the West is at war with all of Islam? I mean, that's a nutty statement. And again, I would never defend that. That's insane. Has anybody said that? Cite the time and place and I'll denounce it. But you can't because they haven't, as you know. So come on, let's just be adults here for a second. They didn't say that. You're creating a straw man. Let me ask you this. Do you think that ISIS is waging what it believes is a religious war? And if you don't, then why are they targeting and murdering Christians? Why did they eliminate all 60,000 of them in Mosul? We didn't write anything saying that ISIS does not believe that they're fighting a religious war.
Okay, so what is wrong with saying that they're acting out of what appear to be religious motives? How does that hand them a propaganda coup? Why is Steve Bannon or anybody in Washington?
That's not what he is saying.
Okay, well, tell me what just give me an example of what you think is wrong that he said. It's not in your piece, but perhaps you have a reserve from all the research your researchers have been doing. I want to know. If you've got someone at the sitting in an NSC meetings who think we're at war with Indonesia, then that's like a massive problem for all of us. So reveal the information that you've gathered and convince me that he's the same as Baghdadi. Do you have it?
Tucker, this is a cheap shot. I mean, I can't sit here.
It's not a cheap shot. You just made a piece that compared the guy to al-Baghdadi, and I'm saying back it up.
I'm one editor on an editorial board. I didn't write this piece. You just made that up.
Okay, you didn't write the piece. I'm sorry. I assumed you were coming to speak on behalf of the editorials. If you're on the editorial board, if you want to defend the editorial, that's fine. I
am here to speak on behalf of the editorial board. And in fact, we told the White House and we told Steve Bannon that we were writing this piece. We sent them emails and asked them to write an opposing view. They chose not to.
Okay, whatever. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they should have. I don't know. I don't run USA Today. So let me just ask you a couple other questions. I'm just interested in them. So the idea is that it's crazy to be worried, and I think you basically say that his dubious theories about clashing global religions, his, quote, overwrought fears. Now, he may have overwrought fears. I don't really know him. Maybe he does. But a lot of Americans are kind of worried about the expressions of Islam they see on the news every night. And they're thinking, if a lot of people like that come here, it's bad for America. You think those are overwrought fears? Why would people have those fears, do you think?
Well, I can certainly understand why people think that there's an extreme fringe of Islam that we need to fight. That's something that Republicans and Democrats have agreed for a long time. But in order to thrive, al-Baghdadi and the Islamic State need to convince a broad population in the Middle East that the West is after them, and we don't need to give them that propaganda victory.
Okay, I mean, I've heard that a lot, but we've had two presidents in a row, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, both of whom, as you noted, went out of their way to say Islam is a religion of peace, we're not at war with all of Islam, and, you know, they kind of repeated that message, like, every day for many, many years, 15 years, and yet ISIS still took over a huge portion of the Middle East, and yet they were fought back not with propaganda but with, you know, weapons. So where's the evidence that this kind of
we know exactly why the Islamic State took over a big swath of the Middle East. Any listener to Fox News knows why, because President Obama withdrew our troops prematurely from Iraq, and the remains of al-Qaeda in Iraq became the Islamic State. And the civil war in Syria gave them a big opportunity. So just because Barack Obama made a huge mistake is not a good reason for a new administration to come in and add some new ones.
You're right. And I agree with you. My only point is, it wasn't because we were insensitive that they hate us. That's all I'm saying. We're out of time. They're telling me I got to stop. David, thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.